Hi, welcome to Overlanding from Home. My name is Anton. I'm an avid overlander, lover of nature, and humanitarian by heart. The past while, I've always been interested in the outdoors, and I want to hear about other people's experiences and their rigs. Yes, the big rigs, the small rigs, everything they've done to design them and how they plan it. I hope you enjoy listening. Let's find out who today's guest is. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks again for signing in. And today I've got, I don't know how to explain it, the volume of distance that this amazing family have done. I'll introduce them in a second, and you can always go down and follow their links in the descriptions below. But today I'm going to introduce Marley and Mish, which is Dan, Marlene, and the kids. And just to be sure, the kids' names are Ava 13, Mila 10, and Luka 8. So thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate this. I don't know how to explain it. It's going to be quite a gnarly chat. You've done an amazing job, Dan, and I think as a father to a family on the road, it's a bit of a challenge, and to mom, it's going to be an interesting one because you have so many different dynamics and factors to worry about. Food and distance and irritable kids and all sorts of stuff like that. I'm really interested to find out how it's going. So how are you?
We're doing good. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I think Dan, let me ask you a question. So in fact, it isn't really just for Dan; it's for you too, Marlene. When we first originally chatted, you said that you wanted to get on the road when you had your first kid and just go and experience a few things. And 12 years, something down the line, it's obviously a very different thought. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's been about 12 years. Like you said, we have 3 kids, and our oldest turned 13 this past January. So she's halfway to being 14 almost, which is kind of a scary thought from my perspective, but yes. Things are still working out. 12 years ago, she was not quite a year old. So more than 12 years ago now, she's not quite a year old when we decided to take her traveling. And obviously the other 2 kids being younger, they weren't born at the time.
Yes.
So, our stories, like you said, it's a little different than most people. We didn't have this like crazy, travel bug, wanderlust that a lot of people talk about.
Yes.
At least not back then. Our goal was to being new parents, like wanting to show our new baby, like, check out this cool place that we just brought you to, like this world. You got all this to look forward to, like this huge, amazing place full of things. Like, how do we even get started? So we did some little bit of traveling. Like, quickly I realized, like, I was going to be the person carrying all the gear, the pack and play, the stroller, the car seat. And then anytime we went anywhere, duffel bag, suitcases. And then we're like, this isn't for us. We're not. And, I've been in the past really bad at like leaving stuff behind in hotel rooms and losing my phone, losing my keys, all this stuff. So I'm just like, you know what? This is a disaster waiting to happen. We got to travel differently.
Yes.
So then we decided to get into kind of, like campers, traveling by land, So, we got our first camper back in 2008 and, started out the first year. We had already been self-employed at the time, or at least working from home. So it wasn't difficult for us to say, you know what, if we're going to travel, we don't have to wait until we have time off. We can just go and work from the road.
Correct.
Not quite as easy back then as it is now because, we didn't have, like, 3G was the best thing. And when we found good 3G, we were thrilled.
All around.
Yeah, we're like, everybody, there's nothing on YouTube yet, but watch whatever you want.
yeah, sure. Absolutely.
But yeah, so, it's been a long time. Like you said, it's changed quite a bit over the years. Obviously, the dynamic changes with more people in our family, and the type of traveling we do has been evolving too. We started out in the U.S., starting from California, just visiting a lot of cities, like you would do. Like if you were going to fly for a holiday, you would go to I want to go check out Austin, Texas, or Nashville, Tennessee, or Seattle, Washington, like big cities. You hear about big cities and like the sights to see and the foods to eat. So that's kind of how we traveled back then, stayed at campgrounds and stuff like that. And over time, we realized that, like this is kind of a perfect style of travel to go find more remote places, to be in nature and go visit all the national parks. So we started evolving towards that, and then nowadays it's sort of primarily what we do. We try to involve more sort of nature type camping, try to find stuff down a hard to find spot down a beaten path, and we'll sprinkle in some culture and cities here and there.
I think it's fantastic. I mean, obviously, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I grew up in the mountains myself. So it was a big deal for me to show my daughter, like this is what it's like when your shoes are off and you're playing in mud, which is what many city kids don't really get to do. And my daughter completely loves it. I mean, if I said to her, we're going to get a van and travel, or even in my Defender and say, listen, we're going to drive and see how it goes. It should be packed and ready in the car in about an hour. And you need to, like you, being a dad, having to worry about all the other stuff. So I want to ask you quickly. Right. I'm going to break this up into two. Dan, how did you choose your first camper? And Marlene, did you give certain criteria of have to but not important things for the camper?
So our very, very first camper, I don't know if you have these in South Africa. They originated from Europe. It's called a tab. It's kind of a modern teardrop camper.
Yes.
It's pretty popular now. I see a lot of them, but back then, we wanted something that was small, and we wanted something that we could pull with the vehicle that we already had. So we shopped around, and then we found a used one. And then, we didn't have a huge list of requirements because, like I said earlier, we were just kind of thinking about doing this as a way to, take our kid out on some trips. So we weren't planning on full timing at the time.
Just like winging it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it was with our when we decided from that tab trailer, we went to a dealership that sold them, and we saw Airstream trailers, and we fell in love with it right away. Didn't think we were going to get one. Recession hit, prices were really low, and we snatched one up for a good price. And that's the camper that we took to all 49 drivable states in the U.S. and beyond, a little bit in Canada.
Yeah, so I think, even though we're in this 4x4 spinner van now, a lot of people who kind of follow our travels have known us for being a family that lived in an Airstream, because we were in that for 7 years.
Okay.
And, it was interesting because the bigger our family grew, the smaller our camper got. That's because of that evolution of wanting to go to places that are hard to get to, and we needed to have a smaller vehicle and didn't want to tow a trailer.
Yes.
So we traded. We didn't trade it. We still have the Airstream. Actually, we have it set up on a friend's property in Arizona, and it's being used as an Airbnb.
Oh, lovely.
So yeah, so we still have it, and in fact, we promised the kids, because they're so attached to it. They grew up in that. They're so attached to it that we promised them at one point that we would never sell it. So, I got to be a person of my word, so I have to stick to that.
Yeah, well, brought to a stake and claim to my Defender, which is named Ollie. And she's like, Daddy, when you get a new Defender or a new vehicle, then Ollie's mine, and we're going to drive together. And bear in mind, she's still only 6. So, there's great ideas I'm going to stick with them. I'm going to hold her to it. I'd love it if it did happen. So out of all the states, obviously getting the vehicle or your camping stuff to some of the islands, is it a challenge? I mean, have you been to the places like and I'm talking about on your first leg, obviously out of the US, Hawaii and things like that? Is it big enough to travel around or to get to them?
Well, Hawaii is the only state in the 50 U.S. states that we haven't taken a vehicle to. Our kids haven't been, but we've been in the past. But we flew there. But that's something that we want to do, but we haven't really decided how to do it. We've taken our vehicles to islands on ferries. Like, obviously, we shipped our Sprinter. We're in Europe now, so we shipped our Sprinter from the east coast of the U.S. across the Atlantic,
yes,
to Europe, to Belgium. We've taken our Airstream to Alaska, but we drove that. There is a way to get up there by the Alaska Marine Highway through ferries. We've taken our previous camper, which was on a Ford F-250 4x4,
okay,
to Newfoundland. So Newfoundland is also an island off the coast of Canada on the East Coast.
We've taken it from the very bottom tip of Baja California to mainland on a ferry also.
That's right. We sailed across from La Paz to Mazatlan. And we've also taken our van on several ferries here in Europe. I think maybe the longest one is to the island of Crete.
Okay.
In
Greece, right?
Yeah, so in Europe, even though it's relatively short amount of time compared to how long we travel, but we've been here almost 2 years now, and we've taken it to like 29 countries in Europe, and we were practically at the southernmost point on the island of Crete in Greece. We drove it all the way up to the northernmost point in Norway, up in Nordkapp. So we've tried to take our van to as many places as we can, and not just to we're not like a lot of overland type. They're very goal oriented. Like these would be like bucket list items.
Yes.
But our motivation is more to see things.
Yeah.
With our own eyes, like to experience it and go spend some time there. So. When we came to Europe, we knew that we wouldn't be able to do Europe in like 6 months. So that's why we committed to coming over here and just basically live here for as long as it took for us to feel like that we've seen it all. And that's kind of how we've, done North America. Like we spent, 10 years traveling all around North America, and then we still feel like there's so many places that we haven't been to.
I think it becomes very challenging, if many, and most of the people that I've had podcasts with, and I think you guys are like number 23 at the moment, that there's a massive drive in order to be self-sustainable on the road. And if you're working from home, then it's easy to just move from, take a laptop from your desk to a laptop in your vehicle. I did a podcast with a gentleman earlier last week, and he's a Dutch guy, lived in South Africa for about 15 years, and then just packed up. He said, I'm going to drive through Africa. And his exact comment was the same as yours. I'm going to go and see how it goes and keep going until I feel I need to stop. There was no end goal. There was no, I have to be here at a certain time. And I think most overlanders feel the need to put a cap on it. They have 6 months to go from A to B, or 3 months. I mean, I was chatting with another gentleman out of Oman, and he was saying, how far will I get in Africa over 3 months? And I said, well, you could spend 3 months in one country. You could land,
right.
Put your vehicle in Mombasa, and you could literally spend 3 months in Kenya alone, and then you've got Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, you've got Ethiopia, which all have incredible spots. And it's very challenging, to to sit back and go, okay, I think I'm completely done with Finland, for example, because there's always extra spots. It makes it very challenging, very challenging.
Yeah, and and I understand that. Like I understand how some people say, okay, I'm going to do this in 3 months or 6 months or 12 months even, and a lot of it comes down to like finance reasons. Not everybody can work from the road, but I think this pandemic that's creating a lot of awareness of what's possible. A lot of people are finding that it is possible to work from home, and if you're going to be working from home, then home can be wherever you want it to be. And I think that's why you are seeing a bit of a boom right now in like camper van sales.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel like that. I don't want to stay in hotels. I don't want to take buses or airplanes or ferries or boats or cruises. I want to be in my own space where I feel safe, but I still want to travel. So now that they figured out that their job will allow them to work from home, at least for the foreseeable future until this whole thing is over, people are seeing that this is possible. Whereas before, we talked to a lot of people, their first thing is that, oh, I don't know how I could do my job, outside of the office. Or I don't know how to manage, like, how do you deal with having kids in the background, stuff like that. But
Yes.
a lot of the times, like, now people are thrust into this. They have to do it. So they're forced to figure it out. And I think some people are realizing maybe it doesn't work quite so well for them, and they're looking forward to going back to the office. But, those other people that are forced to figure it out, hopefully now have figured it out. And then now they actually can see this, with a slightly different perspective, that it is possible, like we've been telling people for a long time.
It's very true. I did another podcast with a guy, Ferenc, out of Hungary, and he spent most of his time along the Eastern Europe, through into China, Mongolia, that type of thing. And these are guys that I should actually introduce you to, because there's a bunch of people in Serbia, Turkey, Hungary that have been through certain areas that may be able to give you tips. But anyway, he's actually written through his website two articles. One is how to be sustainable on the road and not have to be in the office, and the other one is how overlanding is the new holiday destination. Not that it's a place, but it's a way and things to do. I mean, personally, I would rather be doing what you're doing than sitting at a desk or going into a hotel. You lose so much of an area or a country or a region by getting on a bus or flying in and out. So I think, I actually hitchhiked America and Canada in 1999. And by hitchhiking it, I gathered so much in my head that is still there. And I remember sitting in Banff in Canada and in BC and watching these Chinese climb off a bus, take a photo, buy a little something, put it in their bag, climb on the bus and disappear. And I was bothered by that. It really got to me. And to this day, however many years it is, it's still stuck in my head. I don't want to take a photo and then get in my vehicle and disappear again. It's very different. And I think the way that you're doing it, and these are stories that your kids are going to remember. Oh, do you remember when we climbed off the ferry going into Morocco? And do you remember this? And this is the type of thing that kids don't forget. And we all know that all they do is inhale info. So it's amazing how you've planned it. And I think doing it from a young age with your first kid, you've kind of just learned to just go with the flow. And I think this is something that I wanted to ask you, Marlene, is what is your basic requirement for the van? I mean, obviously, Dan, you've put the van together with your wife, but I mean, what is the basic requirement? How do you guys do your sleeping and cooking and cleaning and things like that? What is it about the van that makes it so much easier?
When we first started, there wasn't other families or online things to look at to figure out that there are different possibilities or options. So we bought the Airstream. It had a queen size bed, it had a shower, it had a separate bathroom, kitchen, and we just thought that's how all campers are. And once we traveled for a while and decided to downsize our home, the funny thing is, my requirement was I don't want a permanent bathroom. I don't want an indoor shower. I just want a comfortable place for us to sleep and hang out and have safe seating for the kids while we drive. And that's how it was with our 4-wheel camper when we downsized. And then when we switched to our current Sprinter van, that was a similar thing. I wanted permanent beds for all of us. I don't want to have to break down, move comforters, pillows around every day. It's super annoying when you live on the road full time with 5 people. So that was our number one requirement in the van: permanent beds, factory seatings for the 5 of us.
Yes.
So we always have a place to sit and we always have a place to lay down.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And also, we have the luxury of knowing exactly what works for us, because we've been in since the beginning with that tab trailer. We have been in a tab, we were in an Airstream, and we were in a 4-wheel camper, and then we later got a casita trailer, which is a fiberglass trailer made in Texas. Okay. And now we're in our 5th camper, which is the van. And aside from the van, everything else was factory built. They were laid out by some designer at these factories based on what they thought their customers wanted. So we were able to experience 4 different factory-built campers and know what works and what doesn't work. So when we came to build our own van, we knew exactly what we wanted. Like we weren't coming into this blank slate and then trying to figure out, will this work, will this not work? It was very clear to us what does and what doesn't. And because everything's a compromise, when you have unlimited space, of course we're going to want a permanent shower, permanent bathroom, all the like comforts of a home. But you always have to kind of compromise between how agile and nimble you are off the road versus how much amenities you have. So we realize, this is actually really easy to figure out. Like, how much time a day do you spend doing different things? Well, most of our time is spent sleeping, or at least the bulk, like the largest amount of time doing anything else is sleeping. So let's make sure we have all comfortable places to sleep. And the other times, if we have to work, we're spent sitting somewhere, so we got to have places to sit. We spend very little time going to the bathroom. We spend very little time taking a shower, and then the next from that is like, we spend slightly more time cooking and eating, but that's still not a majority. So let's just use that perspective. How much time do you spend doing something, and prioritize comforts in those areas, and then work down from there. And with 5 people in a long wheelbase Sprinter, there's only so many combinations you have. And when we sort of lay this out, it's like, this is the one. This has to be the one, because anything else would be an experiment that may not work out and that wouldn't be worth it.
I completely agree. And I think, I say this a lot to new overlanders and campers, is that there's always a way off. And you need to figure out what the way off is going to be. Is it size and space? Is it weight? There's so many different things. And I find it amazing that, every 6 months I go through my own vehicle, and I've done most of the stuff on my vehicle. But every 6 months I go through it, and I'm going, I've got this in here. Do I need it? If I don't need it, will I need it one day? Is it something that's got to do with recovery? If I don't need it, why do I have it? Let me get rid of it, or get something a little bit more sleek. And this is something that I've been, I think, the last, say, 3 months, and it just happened to be during the lockdown. In fact, no, the last 6 months. I've been looking at other options for the same thing, like a little kettle, camp stove kettle, and sleeping bags, and little mattresses and things like that. Do I need something bulky? Can I downsize, sell it off, and then buy something that's a little bit more streamlined or more of what I need? And I think that's, you guys have been through all of this in the first, say, 3 or 4 years, understanding what you need. And I think you nailed it on the head. The only main time that you're in your vehicle is either when you're driving, which means you'll be sitting, or when you're sleeping. The rest of it is really minimal, obviously, unless it's raining, but it's really minimal. You don't want the kids to sit in the van. You want them to be outside having fun. I mean, and that's that is, to me, the way that you've nailed it. I mean, looking at your van, I can't see all the proper pics of the inside, but from what I have seen, I think it's amazing. I think you've really got it down.
Yeah. So the other thing that we wanted to make sure that worked for us too is that, because we're not able to pick like windows of time to travel versus not, since we're living in it, we have to make sure that if the weather is bad outside for extended periods of time, that we still can be comfortable all inside and not be driven nuts. So that's why the van ended up working better for us versus our last vehicle. Even though the dimensions are pretty similar, it's about the same length, it's about the same width. And when, the last one had a pop top, so with the top up, it's about the same height. But the big difference for us with the van is that we're able to incorporate the cab space that we're sitting in when we drive into living space as well, whereas we couldn't do that with the truck. So now we have like compartmentalized spaces, even though it's still just the inside of a van. So we can actually have 5 people all laying down on the bed like we would when we're sleeping, and still have 5 people sitting down. I mean, not that we ever have 10 people in our van, but we have these different sections of the area that works well for us. So yeah, we want them to be outside as much as possible. Like this place that we're at right now, it's amazing. It's beautiful. We're actually sitting on the shady side of the van outside right now doing this podcast. And it's weather's perfect, and I'd rather be here doing this than inside the van. But on the other hand, if it starts to rain, it's okay too. If it's really bad weather, yeah, we have the luxury of packing up and driving some other place that's nicer. So that's the thing. We don't have to be stuck somewhere if it gets really bad.
I think it's very, very cool. And I'm just having a look at some of your gear here. So, we all know Victron. They're really, really good electric components. You've got a good size gas cylinder, which will obviously last you well. Do you swap between, so we call it a braai, which is a barbecue for you. Do you barbecue or braai as often as you can, or do you prefer to just use the gas and get cooking out the way for dinner?
We carried a barbecue for the last 2 years, and we intended on using it more, but we didn't end up using it as much as we thought, mostly because it requires a lot of water for cleaning, and water becomes a pretty scarce commodity when you're in the middle of nowhere and you have 5 people. Yes. So, we think about, okay, I would love to have this piece of meat grilled instead of cooked on the stove, but what sacrifices are we making because of that? So, like you were saying earlier, like every 6 months, figure out what works and what doesn't, what you can optimize, what you can't. We kind of did the same thing with the barbecue. It's okay, if we got rid of this barbecue, what do we lose? And in its place, what can we put there instead? So in fact, we just sort of decided that the barbecue, let's try it without for the next few months and see if we really miss it. So we don't barbecue outside as much anymore, but we do have the ability to like cook over fire. We have skewers, we have cast iron griddle that, we can place over an open fire. So, we don't have fires that often. And actually here where we are right now, somebody built a fire pit, but we took it apart because we were in the middle of a forest and we don't want to, in the summertime, it's not legal to have a fire. Yes. So we're not cooking outside that much, but it is like that where we're optimizing things ongoing, and it's not that different than like what like a backpacker would do to optimize their gear, because they're also very weight sensitive. Yes, you spend $50 on a titanium cup over a stainless cup because it weighs like 3 ounces less, or something like that. But to us, it's not obviously not that extreme, but we have to kind of balance, because we do live full time in it. We have to balance not just lightweight and compact, also has to be durable. Like we don't want to have something break and have to be replaced every 6 months to a year. We rather carry something that's a little bit heavier duty that's going to last us.
True. Very, very true. So I actually have a little gas braai that I'll send you a link to it. I completely love this thing. And I bought it because when I first started going out a lot further distances and a lot more hectic terrain, I didn't want to get somewhere and it's like, 6:30 at night, and back there my daughter would have been 2 or 3, and she's crying because she's hungry, and my wife's trying to shoot me with her eyes because we're late. And I bought this little gas braai from Amazon on the US, and I completely love this thing. I've reconnected it so that it fits with a similar cylinder that what you have. I just got a pipe with a quick release attachment, and I use the same cylinder for everything. To do teas and coffees, I use a pan, as well as for the gas braai. And I think I'll send you a link. If it works for you, fine. But I tell you what, it just makes life so much easier. And then the reason I actually ask it is because obviously braaiing or using a barbecue is a lot more time consuming and a lot more relaxing than it is just getting dinner out the way. Maybe I'm actually saying it a bit too insensitive because you guys do it all the time. Okay, let's just move on. All right, so looking at some of your other gear, I see you've chosen BFG KO2s. They're a good tire.
Yeah, we actually have been using BFG since we downsized from the Airstream. When we switched to the 4x4 four-wheel camper, what we realized is that this is the best tire that's both for on-road and off-road. We've tried some Michelins, we've tried some Coopers. I mean, those are all good tires also. We haven't tried any General tires, and I hear that those are also good. Yes. But we just had really good experience. And with the BFG all-terrains, I go way back to like high school when I first started driving. I had a Jeep Wrangler YJ, and I had BFG all-terrains on that. Of course, they're the older versions from the early 90s. Yeah. But I just loved them. And then I looked at them again, and then we switched them to BFGs on our Ford F-250, and I actually found those to be quieter on the road than the stock street tires that they came in. So when we got the Sprinter, we actually tried Coopers for a while, and then we switched back to the BFGs.
Which Coopers did you try, Dan?
Do you remember the name? They were...
Don't.
Okay.
I can dig it up and send it to you.
It's not a big deal.
I think they were comparable to the KO2s. Mm-hmm. Maybe they were the Cooper version of the KO2. So, but for us, it's really also about just, the durability. Like, we've had really good experience off-road driving on rocks, yes. And they last, we get, I don't know, 50, 60,000 miles on these tires.
That's good. That's road. Really good.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. That's impressive. I mean, all-terrain tire. It's a really, really good tire. They Cooper in the southern half of Africa is becoming a lot more popular because it works. The compound is really is designed for the terrain. But KO2s and BFG have a very good name in the industry, and I mean, I'm not knocking them at all. They're just very different to what I would use for where I go. But there's a number of things that everyone does according to what they want, and there's no right or wrong. Listen, they're a good tire. I want to ask you. So, did you choose the Dometic fridge, or was it part of the deal with the van?
We've actually had Dometic products going all the way back to the beginning because our Airstream came with all Dometic products. Okay. Fantastic fans, Dometic air conditioning, Dometic fridge, Dometic stovetop. So we actually had been using it, and before we even started working with them, we started working with Dometic about 3 years ago, I think. Okay. They reached out to us and say, hey, we're starting this ambassador program, and we're like, oh, we use your products for the last 8 years already or 9 years already. So, we love it, and it's a perfect kind of marriage between an ambassador and a company. And we've been like offered programs like this from companies that we don't know, and it doesn't make sense for us to work with them when we don't know anything about their product. So that's why we agreed to work with Dometic on something like this. And the Dometic fridge was actually something that they gave us to try before we built the van, before we even bought the van. They say, hey, we acquired Waco from Australia a few years ago, and now we're rebranding them to Dometic.
Yes.
And we knew that Waco had a good reputation. They had good fridges. So then they're like, we'd like to send you one to try out. So they sent us one, but we didn't really have a way to use it back then because, until the van, everything was factory built and came with a fridge. So we already had a Dometic upright fridge in there. So we're like, yeah, great. So it was funny because when we first got that fridge, I was looking at it, and I was looking at Marlene's like, we should build a van around this fridge. Rather than buying a van and then, figuring out what goes inside. Like that fridge was like, okay, now we got to do something with this.
I have to put it somewhere.
Yeah, he was totally joking. And
I was totally joking, but it ended up happening a couple years later.
Yeah, one day I'm like, yeah, let's get a van.
Shall we leave a kid somewhere and take the seat and put...
Yeah, exactly. Imagine all the drinks, all the extra drinks we can stuff in here.
Oh, lovely. But I mean, so it's a 65 liter, right?
Yeah, we started with the 65. We started with the CFX 65, but we've actually upgraded just last year when they came out with their CFX 3 series. We upgraded to the 75.
Okay.
Main reason is because the 75 has 2 compartments, so we can have a freezer, a dedicated freezer. And it required a little bit of reconfiguring of our fridge platform. We had to extend it by 20-30 centimeters.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually worked out. We had the space to do it. And we ended up building a shelf that we can put our spices and oils on for cooking outside, rather than in the past we had to dig them out of a cabinet before every time we cooked. So now it's actually, the fridge is bigger and we have more storage space for pantry stuff.
It sounds like it's really you guys have really found a way to make things happen for what you need. And I think I have a 40 liter, and I'm on borderline now trying to figure, should I get something slightly bigger? But I can't. I have the only one back area of a Defender. I can't exactly just move it up, because if I do, it's going to take up a little bit too much extra space, and then I'm going to not be able to put my ammo crates next to it, which I've designed to tie down. So I'm in a bit of a predicament myself.
Yeah.
But, I'm quite surprised that even a 75 liter works for 5 of you, because kids at that age are just inhaling food. And do you have a lot of dry storage? Peanuts, raisins, dry snacks that kids snack on during the day.
I would say, even with the 75, you're right. It's after we go shopping, we have food everywhere. After we if we know we're going to be a few days, we go stock up before, and it's always we get to where we're going. It's okay. We got to eat some of the stuff off of our bed so we can free up some space. But yeah, they do eat a lot these days. Every day seems like they're eating more. For a few years, we were able to get away with them sharing one adult-sized meal, but those days are long gone. Now they're practically eating an adult-sized meal per person.
Yeah, the logistics are very, very interesting. So, I mean, out of 7 nights a week, how many lunches and dinners do you eat at a takeaway or a restaurant or something, compared to making it in van?
Well, lately, since we crossed into Morocco back in February, so for the last 6 months now, we probably have eaten out less times than I can count on one hand.
Sure.
Just because, during the pandemic, we were concerned about like, okay, is it safe? Is it safe to eat out? Should we just make food? So we ended up just making food. Even in Morocco, what's really cheap to eat out, we end up camping at places where there's no practical place to go eat out. So we just stock up on groceries, and then we make, like, if you do the numbers for the last 6 months, that's probably like 99% of our meals in.
That's pretty good. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to try and make it work.
Yeah. Hasn't always been the case, though. Hasn't always been the case. Like I was saying at the beginning, that our modes of traveling have changed. And at the beginning, when we were going to Nashville, like, hey, we're in Nashville, we got to eat at Nashville. We're in Austin, we got to eat in Austin. We got to go to, the 72-ounce steak place in Amarillo, Texas. And we got to go to this, the famous fish market in Seattle, Washington, and eat there. So we did a lot of eating out. And actually, I would even say, even towards the end of us traveling in the United States, like it's much easier for us there to eat out because it's easy to park. Seems like food places are everywhere. And sometimes, like you say, you drive, and you can either spend an hour on the side of the road, make food, do dishes, clean up, or you can spend 20 minutes, hop into a place real quick, grab a bite, and then be on the road again. So, when we travel like faster and longer distances, I think we tend to eat out more because it's more convenient. Yes. But in the last 6 months, because of all the stuff that's happening, we've slowed down a ton, which means that it's not a big deal to spend, some time cooking, figure out what we want to eat, and just take things slowly.
So I want to just touch on it quickly, and the podcast isn't about the virus, but I've read a bunch of times that quarantined. How many times have you been quarantined?
We've officially have only been quarantined once, which is when we went down to Morocco in February. We spent almost 2 months, or just about 2 months there before the lockdown happened. And then, on our YouTube channel, you can see like the whole story about us being locked down. There's probably 4 or 5 videos where we sort of showed what happened to us while we were there and how we, eventually got on the ferry with a bunch of other people.
But we were in a kind of a staging area and we weren't allowed to leave. So I
guess that's kind of quarantine in a way, but that's more of a lockdown than anything else. But when we came back from Morocco to Europe, it took us, we went from Morocco to France because Spain was peaking at the time and they weren't allowing anybody in. So we had to take the long ferry to France. And from France, we took 3 days to drive back to Croatia, where is actually our country of residency at the moment. So we were allowed to come back. And when we came back, we had to officially be quarantined for 14 days, not allowed to leave the apartment that we were in.
Yeah, couldn't take out our trash, get groceries.
Yeah, monitored. And since then, we've stayed in Croatia. We haven't left Croatia since we got back. And this would have been about 4 months ago.
Sure. Okay. But you're obviously enjoying Croatia enough that you're not in a rush to find another spot.
No, so Croatia is actually Marlene's parents' home country. That's where they were born. So that's how we were able to get residency here. Marlene and the kids have dual citizenship. They have American passports and Croatian passports. And me, as the spouse, I was able to get residency. So that actually worked out really well for us because it gives us freedom to travel Europe pre-pandemic. And then post-pandemic, it gave us the assurance that we'd be able to come back to Europe. In fact, some of our friends that were Americans and Canadians that were in Morocco at the same time as us, they were stuck there for months after we left because they weren't allowed into Europe. So, we've been to Croatia a number of times before, a couple times with kids, a couple times before we had kids. Marlene's been coming here since she was a kid. But Croatia's like most of Europe, summer is the popular place where everybody, takes holiday and vacation and go travel. So it's really busy in the summer, like especially right now. Right now is basically the peak. And our original plan was to not be in Croatia during the summer, to avoid the crowd and also to avoid the heat. We wanted to be in the northern parts. That's why last summer we went to Norway. This summer, the original plan was to be in Scotland, and then we wanted to go sort of travel based on seasons and, to get nice weather. But knowing that this was going to happen and we came back to Croatia in April, suddenly we realized this was an opportunity to spend a summer in Croatia that we weren't planning on doing and actually do some swimming in the Adriatic Sea that had we not been here in the summertime, it would be too cold to swim in.
Correct.
We also felt like, well, this is also a good opportunity to be in Croatia during a season that's probably going to be the least amount of people that they've seen for probably a couple decades, because it's gotten so popular as a destination that in the summer, it's shoulder to shoulder. You don't even want to be here. But we felt like, wow, this is an opportunity to kind of be at a destination place that's not as crowded as a normal year. But it turns out it's still pretty crowded, so we had to get away from the coast.
We're hiding in the mountains.
Yeah.
A slight backfire.
Yeah.
Slight backfire. But, it got us to explore. It's kind of like where we're from in California. We used to live just a couple hours from Joshua Tree National Park. And it took us probably 5-6 years of traveling on the road before we ever went to Joshua Tree for the first time, because we always took it for granted. We always assumed that's going to be there, we'll go. But we went to like all these different places on the East Coast, went to the Florida Keys, went to all these different national parks around the country before we even went to the national park that's closest to where we used to live. So I feel like Croatia was kind of that way too. It's like, oh yeah, we'll go to these national parks in Croatia when we have the time. But, this happens to be the perfect year for us to do that. So we're enjoying having the opportunity to do it here, even though, it wasn't the original plan. But the way that we travel, like you said, we have that flexibility and we're making the best of it.
And that's the way that it should be. I mean, I think we've touched on it already, that it's very difficult, and you lose so much feeling of where you're going if you rush it. So I want to ask just one or two more things, and then I'm sure you've also got a day to get to. What do you use for your navigation? I mean, do you use the general Garmin stuff and then buy the maps for the areas that you're in, or do you just buy road maps in the country that you arrive? Do a brief planning online and then start heading out?
We don't do a ton of planning as far as where we go. So we have general ideas of where we want to go. So I've always I don't have any specialized overlanding like navigational gear. And I think it's mostly also because the way that we got into this lifestyle was gradual. It was not like, we didn't plan a big trip where I had a lot of time to spend in front of Google and Amazon, research the best stuff. Whatever I had at the time, 12 years ago, that's what I stuck on the dash of my window, and then we started driving with it. It was just the basic Garmin. And I've gotten 2 or 3 other basic Garmin GPSs since. We went to we're so bad. Maybe bad is not the right word, but we're so, this whole not planning where we're going thing is so embedded in us that when we went to Alaska, we drove across into Canada. And it wasn't even the first time we went to Canada. We drove into Canada and we realized our Garmin didn't have Canadian maps. And then we went to a Canadian Walmart and bought a basic GPS there so we could have Canadian maps. So we can drive through Canada, and then obviously in Alaska we had maps. But nowadays, because we have to work also, so we have to have internet connection. It's not difficult to just even use Google Maps as our navigation tool, and just use our phones and have our Garmin as the backup. And also, if we have to download offline maps, if we don't have internet service for whatever reason, we use maps.me. you can download offline maps for that.
That's right.
And in Morocco, some countries, surprisingly, I don't know, maybe other parts of Africa too, but in Morocco, we didn't have turn-by-turn navigation in Google Maps.
Really?
The feature wasn't available, so they use Waze there. So we just turned on Waze and use Waze there, But a lot of the more interesting adventures that we went on have been rooted in the misnavigation of our GPS.
Lovely. I've just moved over from a Garmin. They stole it out of my vehicle during the first 3 weeks of lockdown, and
Oh man,
I've just got an iPad Mini and connected the Garmin InReach Mini, and that makes everything for me. It's my media in my vehicle. I can download movies onto it. It's my my mapping and routing. I've got everything on it. Same maps.me, map out. I end up using Google Maps a fair amount because it's nice to map for me when I do my humanitarian work. I map out where I'm going on my iMac, and then I just transfer it straight onto the computer. I mean, onto my iPad Mini, which makes life a little bit easier. So I'm a big fan of like you are, multiple functions off the same item. So it did work out for me. But I think what you just said is very true to how you're living your life, and it's exactly that. You're literally climbing in and you're heading out. Which way we'll go that way, and stop when we need to stop. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and the other thing about how we use Google Maps too is that I put a lot of pins on locations that people tell me about, and then if we happen to go into a place, and I'll just look at what pins I've put. I remember going to Bulgaria last year for the first time, and then suddenly I realized I was near this cave that I had placed a pin almost a decade ago. I saw some photo on social media of this really cool cave that had these two holes that form a set of eyes beaming down from the roof. Now, wow, it's like, we should go here one day. And this is way before we ever thought that we would ship our vehicle to Europe. And then suddenly I was within like half a day's drive from it. So just constantly like looking at, where people are going to, just looking at things that interest us and then placing pins. And then now, when we first came to Europe, that cave in Bulgaria was the only pin I had on the continent. And now when open up Google Maps, there's like, hundreds of pins all over.
Endless.
So, yeah.
All right. So just two more things quick. Marlene, what's your most or best used item you have in the van?
That's not like permanent.
Do you want it to be like a common? Should it be an unexpected one?
It can be anything that you think I could not live without this in the van.
Every single item has got basically become something that we can't live without, because if we live without it, it's gone. But I'm gonna let Marlene say her top one then.
This is gonna maybe sound funny, but we have this collapsible bucket that I really love, and it's just I don't know what the material. It collapses, and I use it if I need to wash dishes outside, or if I'm at a campground, need to take it to a sink far away. I can do laundry in it. I can store extra groceries from the grocery store and our wine bottles in it. It's just, I really love it.
Well, so we actually said this to our friends a couple years ago who also travel. They've gone to a bunch of different countries with their van as well. We told them this is the best thing we have in our van, and they're like, thinking we're just pulling their legs. Like, the best thing, really, the best thing
out of everything.
Like, well, actually, yeah, I think it is the best thing. And then you know what? They got one. Next year, they got one.
That's beautiful. And Dan, what's yours?
Well, I love that bucket too, to tell you the truth. But the best thing, I love that I routed a plug from the house battery up to the dash above my head. There's a little storage shelf above the driver's seat. I routed a 12-volt socket from the leisure battery to the front so that I can just leave things plugged in there, and I power everything from it. I power GoPros, I power the GPS. I don't have to worry about it draining the car battery because it's running off of the back. So it's yeah. So before I would wake up in the middle of the night and thinking, oh my God, I forgot to unplug that thing that's using the house or the car battery. We're going to wake up with no way to start the car. So a lot of my favorite things in the vehicle has to do with how much trouble would I be in if I didn't have it.
Yes. Lovely. That's good. Listen, I've put USB charging points in certain areas, and I think one of the best things I've done is taken a cable that goes through my dash at the back without having to drill a hole, and charges my iPhone and my iPad while driving, and it's a completely like hidden cable. So
exactly.
I'm 100% respect what you're saying, because if it wasn't there, it would be more clutter in my face while I'm driving.
Right. Nobody notices it because it's all hidden away. They're just like a little wire poking out, but it changes everything.
Completely agree. So this is my last question here is something that people tend to know off the top of their head. So maybe you guys do. So what is your best and worst moment while being overlanding? And it's a tough one because you've had you have a long history of 12 years. So I mean, do you have anything that sticks out in your head right now that is your best and worst moment? And they both don't have to be the same. Marlene, you can have a different one to Dan.
I mean, there was this moment when we're in Oaxaca, Mexico, where like we had to deal with like a shady taxi driver who were friends with the police, and they're trying to scam us for a bunch of money. And it was in front of the kids, and the kids were really scared. So like, it wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't call it like my worst moment. It was just a very, very unfortunate moment because we love the country so much that to have something like that kind of taint our memory, to have something like that happen in front of the kids.
Leave a sour taste in your mouth.
At a young age too, and I feel like that they were like truly frightened because they were, Oaxaca is one of the poorest states in Mexico, so there's a fair amount of just small time corruption, with the police there. So they were really just there to like get some money out of you, but they do it by way of intimidation. So there were like 6 or 7 police cars and a dozen police there for something that like this taxi guy claimed that we like cut him off, even though, but to have that happen, to have that sour taste in our mouth for the place was unfortunate. But by and large, like we still love Mexico, and it's one of the places that, we potentially would want to have a piece of land there and maybe have a little getaway somewhere on the coast. But that was not a great moment.
And I agree. That's my probably worst moment too.
And then some of our best moments, I don't know. I remember I didn't actually. So my best moment is something that happened to Marlene, I think.
Oh,
maybe she'll agree too. we were in we're in Alaska, and we had been in Alaska. It was during the summertime, so it was the sun is out like it is in Scandinavia here, and in the northern latitudes where the sun doesn't go down. So it never gets really dark enough if you go to Alaska in the summer to see northern lights. But we want to see northern lights really badly while we're up there. So we stayed. It was probably like late August, and it's starting to get a little bit chilly, and it finally gets dark enough right around like 1:00, for us to see northern lights. And then we waited this one night. We knew it was going to be clear. We knew that we had a good opportunity that the more favorable that it was going to happen. And then I remember seeing it. They start coming down and dancing. And then I drove around. I took the truck and drove around to the other side of this bay that we were at to get a better view from the other side. But then I was talking to Marlene on the phone, and then she was telling me that I'm looking at these. Are you seeing these lights? It's amazing. I didn't think that they would move like this. And she said, you know what? And I looked down on the ground. There was a bunny standing next to me, also looking up at the northern lights.
I forgot about that.
Like mesmerized by these lights. Because we were in the city. We're in the city, Valdez.
Valdez, yeah.
Somebody in Valdez had decided to get bunnies for their kids, and then a couple years, or even maybe even less than that, decided that they don't want these bunnies anymore. So they just let their bunnies loose, and now they're just like like wild bunnies running around the whole town. Because you know what they say about bunnies.
Yeah, of course.
They multiply.
Yes.
But it's somehow kept in a reasonable population because, there's some...
The cold and predators.
Yeah, there's some predators around. But yeah, there are just these random bunnies hopping around.
that's, I say this every podcast, but no good story ever started off with when you went to the kitchen to boil the kettle for a cup of tea, and
right.
It
no
happens every single time.
Yeah.
So listen.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have a different one, or is that yours too?
I think you covered it all.
Oh, you took the easy way out, Marlene. But no problem. Listen, I don't think there's much that'll top bunnies staring at the lights with you.
No.
Yeah. Well, I almost expected the bunny to have like a camera to take photos of
it. Beautiful. I love it. So you guys have done, I think it was 250,000 Ks in the US, right?
Yeah. So basically, we were living full time on the road. So we never actually did any kind of like calculation of how many miles we drove, but whatever miles we have on the vehicles, that's how many miles we drove.
Sure.
Because we were full time. Yeah, we went through 3 vehicles over that time, and it was about 250,000 miles.
It's a big number. So, now that you've got residency in Europe and obviously back in the US, any plans on coming to into the southern part of Africa?
We will see how we feel about this more modern, because our concern is, taking a more modern Sprinter van with the modern diesel engine in certain countries that we may not find the proper fuel for it. Okay. So it's the same concern that we have for Central and South America, that we need ultra low sulfur diesel, and a lot of places you can't get it. And it's these newer vehicles, they're not great with the high sulfur or the higher sulfur diesel, and they'll just go into cripple mode, and we don't want to be stuck somewhere because we put the wrong fuel in there. So until we do some more research and figuring it out, like we would love to either come down further into Africa, or if we have the ability to drive across Asia, whether it be through Mongolia or Russia or maybe the stands,
yes,
and then maybe somehow end up in on the Pacific side of Russia.
Yes.
And go back to California that way. So, those are all options, but we probably won't know until another year or so from now which way we're going to go. Sure.
Well, we have 50p and 500p. 500 is mostly for the big trucks, and in most cases you can get good quality diesel in SADC. In fact, in all over, I've never. Most guys put an extra filter through, just to catch any other junk or nonsense or moisture. But
right.
Either way. You've got a fan waiting for you.
I think there are mods that we can do to make the van accept, more various types of diesel.
Yes.
We just have to figure out if that's something we want to do while we're here, so we can go further, or if that's something we want to do when we get back to North America, maybe do the mod and then go south from there.
Yes.
But until we find the right process and the right, because we also bought this van new a couple years ago, and whatever mods we do to it will void the warranty. So we're sort of thinking about waiting for the warranty to expire first, and then there's no reason for us to not do it.
Correct. Makes sense. Well, listen, you have a big fan waiting for you when you get to South Africa. Hopefully sooner than later. And guys, thanks really much. I really love this. I think I could have spent another hour talking, but we have a day to start. So thank you very much. And blessings to all 5 of you. I'm really amazed at how you control it. I mean, there was stuff I didn't even get to ask you, schooling and things like that, but maybe another time. But listen, enjoy the summer. Thank you very much for the effort and the time that you've given into chatting. I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited to see where you guys are heading off to next. At the moment, things are lightening up in Europe.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having us. We enjoyed it as well.
Thank you.
No problem. Have a good rest of your day, Dan and Marlene, and go and have some good meals. I think you deserve a bit of a snack out instead of in the van.
Yeah, maybe we'll make the kids cook lunch for us.
Well, maybe you want to eat instead of cleaning up.
Clean up. There'll be a lot of cleanup to do.
Enjoy your
All right,
day.
Tom,
Thanks very much for your time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.